Couple of fighters looking to rebound off of terrible UFC debuts. We have Switzerland, Stephanie Egger. Not often I get to say that we have a Swiss MMA fighter. She's taking on Knoxville's own Shanna Young, the Shanimal. Not a big fan of that nickname. She looks absolutely bodied up on the Instagrams, and she's a fighter that has spent time at 135 and at 125. Her short notice debut was against somebody who's on this card in Macy Chiasson. And for Stephanie Egger, her debut was against somebody that featured prominently in every single UFC promo they had. Not Brian Ortega, it's Tracy Cortez. Tracy Cortez. And for Stephanie Egger, Matt, let's throw it on back. We have a 15-minute card breaks. And if you haven't checked it out, it's our second channel, at 15-minute card break, over on the IGs and the TikToks. But we have a rookie review because Stephanie Egger is one of the more credentialed fighters that you're going to find, not just inside of the cage, but outside of the cage with her judo. So let's throw it on back there. Mullarkey's out, Egger's in. What do we know about Stephanie Egger? I mean, Stephanie Egger, so far, black belt in judo that she earned many, many years ago. And if you look down through her total record outside of the cage in MMA, because she's a late bloomer, I mean, 5'1" at 32 years of age, what has she really done, Craig? I mean, she's medaled and competed at, listen, you pick the tournament for judo, she's been in it and she's medaled in it. And since then, really rounded out her game. Blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's an ADCC European champ. She competed at the 2019 ADCC World Championships. Lost in the finals to Gabby Garcia, who outweighs her by probably 100 pounds. And it went into overtime in that one.
Lost on points. No shame in that.
You know that Stephanie Egger is good at the takedowns, good at jiu-jitsu. And don't just take my word for it. Go back and watch some of Stephanie Egger's fights. And the thing that I like, before I let you go off, Matt, is the fact that Stephanie Egger does something that we actually saw, and this is a poor example, but it ties in at 135. Ronda Rousey was so good at throws above the waist. She could really just ragdoll her opponents around. Stephanie Egger, a lot taller and thinner than Rousey, but she's able to do a lot of the same things. Also, her striking quite good, and I know you're going to talk about one of her major wins, but her striking is very good. She can mix in the kicks. She throws nice punches down the middle. She does leave herself susceptible. She will throw some wild looping shots, but she can stick behind the nice jab. Apart from that, Stephanie Egger, well-rounded enough, but it's that judo and jiu-jitsu background that she has that I think matches up very well against Tracy Cortez.
I agree 100%. When you go through Egger's past record, and we do this a lot, well, not even a lot, we do this for every fighter, you look through the past record, kind of see the level of competition. A lot of people making their UFC debut have fought a lot of those 0-0s, 1-1s, 0-1s. Egger fought semi-decent talent in over at Rise, and you probably heard of the name King Reina before. She beat her in one of her first fights, well, one of her first 6 MMA fights, so that's a really impressive thing to do when you go over there. Fight not only one of Risen's better women's fighters, but one of kind of the faces of their organization, or at least at the time. Put on an impressive performance. Her grappling is really good. And she is great at going for the throws and then going immediately into a submission. So she'll hit you with that arm throw. If you do leave an arm out, she'll attack that. If she can get to your back, she'll do the same. So stylistically, this is a really interesting matchup because it's going to come down to, will the size and strength of Egger kind of outweigh the skills of her?
For Egger, and we had talked about it, I mean, you look at her debut was against Judith Ruiz, who at this point, 6-5, she just made her Bellator debut in the last calendar year. All right, but Judith Ruiz, pretty good name on the European scene. Then she beat Mara Romero Barella, who, I get it, just got cut by the UFC, but still, that's really good competition to be taking on the regional scene, especially in your second fight. First and second fight, you had mentioned the fight against Reina, and this is where, to me, it gets very interesting. I think this fight stylistically matches up a lot like a fight that we had recently with a name that one of these fighters has faced, not in MMA, but has faced in the past. Stephanie Egger, when she was competing at ADCC, took on Yulia Stoliarenko back in the 2019 World Championships. All right, so for Stephanie Egger, you take on Gabby Garcia in pure grappling. You have a win over King Reina in MMA. Pretty darn good stuff. I picked Egger to beat Tracy Cortez, and she got heavily out-wrestled and didn't really get a chance to get moving in that fight. And for Shanna Young, kind of the same thing can be said, but she took on a decent striker, Macy Chiasson, who's not necessarily known for her wrestling.
No, exactly. That was kind of the surprising thing to see from Chiasson. It was going to be a good fighter, at least you thought going into it, because, okay, Shanna Young, she's a great striker, Chiasson, same thing, and then Macy all of a sudden decided, hey, I'm a pretty good MMA fighter, and I can switch this up. Now, I guess we'll talk more about Macy's evolution later on, but it was a really hard UFC debut for both of these fighters, and I'm honestly going to be a little bit tougher on Stephanie Egger, because we saw her get out grappled when that is her specialty. That's a really big issue. And you talked about it. She does have the judo background. She competes in jiu-jitsu. Like, her grappling is world class, but in practice and in the cage, it didn't look that way against Tracy Cortez whatsoever. And Cortez is a good wrestler, but I don't even think Tracy Cortez is in the higher tier of wrestling in the division. I would say she's closer to Carla Esparza than she is to Tatiana Suarez, and she's probably even below Carla Esparza.
And is Tracy Cortez actually a bantamweight, or is she a flyweight?
And that was the thing, too. To see Egger, who looked like the much bigger fighter, just get out-muscled consistently in that fight, it was just really tough to see. And for Egger, I'm not surprised that they did give her another fight, but I don't really know if she is UFC caliber. She didn't really show as many dimensions of her game as you'd hope. On the feet, Tracy Cortez is pretty basic, and if you are the longer fighter, you should be able to get from point A to point B fairly easily on a fighter like Cortez, but Egger didn't even really show the ability to do that. She was so worried with the takedown attempts from Tracy Cortez that she wouldn't even really let her own game go. Now, I will say, Stephanie Egger, great up kicks, hurt Tracy Cortez with one of those. Niko Price, another guy on this card known for his up kicks, but it was one of the few flashes of brilliance, I would say, from her UFC debut that you can shine hope on, but I just don't like what we saw from Egger. When you are a grappler coming into the cage, it would be nice for you to have some success in the grappling department.
Now, when I look at this fight, yeah, this is a clash of styles. Egger is a pure grappler. Shanna Young has some grappling and wrestling credentials in her back pocket, wrestled in high school on the guys' team. She also wrestled, and I want to make sure I get it right, at King's University. And there was one website, it might have even been the Invicta site, that said that she was an All-American, but I couldn't find it anywhere else online, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But when I look at Shanna Young, very decent striking. She has a karate background, a little bit of a black belt there as well. And that's where you see her game shine through. I think her best win of her career was very early on when she took on Wham Bam, Pam Sorensen, and got a win there. But other than that, it's losses to some pretty notable fighters. The 5-on-in, a loss to Sarah Alpar by finish on Contender Series. That's bad. She lost to Miranda Maverick. That was the Invicta Phoenix Series. And that's the other thing. The UFC and ESPN have Shanna Young's record as 8-4, but I think they're counting those one-round Phoenix Series fights, and I'm not. It's 7-3. So she beats Maiju Sotama, and she lost to her in Invicta Phoenix Series, but she won in a real fight. And then she loses to Macy Chiasson. She's been out for a year and 7 months. For Egger, she's been out almost a full year. So yeah, it really is, again, clash of styles. When I look at the odds for this one, Young opened the favorite at a -150. She's now a +102 underdog. Egger open the underdog +130. She's now at a -123. We haven't seen the Tapology votes. I'm going to go, Matt, under over 60% Shanna Young.
I'm going to say over. I think it's 70-30.
All right, we look at the, holy smokes, 729 votes, 59% Young, 92% by decision, 41% have Egger, 75% by decision. And this is where it gets squirrely when we make a pick on this one, because this is a weird fight. It's unfortunate that, you know, with both of these fighters had so-and-so records coming into the UFC. For Egger, obviously, it was 5-1 against decent competition, but the last one that she had was over a fighter that was 4-4. It was really hard to tell what you were going to get. I know, obviously, there's some trepidation with the pick. So who are you going with here?
I think the physicality of Young is going to play a big factor in this fight. Whether or not it means that she can take Eggers down to the mat or just hold her up against the cage, I still think that it's going to be a massive factor in this fight. If you can get out-muscled and out-wrestled by a 125er, I am going to have concerns about you fighting a fairly big bantamweight at that in Young. So ever so slightly, I will side with Shanna Young, but I'm sure there's a version of Stephanie Eggers out there who can judo hip toss Young onto her head and armbar like Ronda Rousey. I just don't think we're going to see it.
I think that's the one that we're going to get. I like Egger in this fight because, again, both of these fighters have a strength where it's the other fighter's weakness. So it really is a bit of a toss-up for me. But I do like Egger with those credentials. She's not taking on a Tracy Cortez type in this fight. So I'll go with the Swiss native Stephanie Egger. You've got the American here in Shanna Young. Absolutely wild card with Santos taking on Walker up at the top. You're not going to want to miss it. Let's keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.